Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. I hope everyone is very well. So I'm just going to say hello to everyone in the stream tonight. Oh, we're up to 42 and I haven't even started yet. That's fantastic. So Dave, evening Max, evening to you, Dave. I hope you're very well. Suzanne, great to see you again. Richard, hi, hope you're well. Keith, great to see you. David Clay, welcome back. Glasgow Kiss, great to see you again. Thanks for your tireless efforts in moderating both here and on the Discord server. Pauline, great to see you again. Colin, hope you're well. So yes, actually Cummins got a caution by police for breaking lockdown to visit his parents while claiming to be COVID-19 positive. A member of SAGE, where is his resignation? Yes, exactly. So I wanted to talk about that first this evening. Mark, welcome. Jack, great to see you. Magister, great to see you again. Maria, welcome. Elidio, welcome back. Colin, great to see you. Kenny, Lennon, I know I'm mispronouncing that. Killer, great to see you. Leon, sorry, welcome back. Great to have you back again. Why is my mouse not working? Okay. The hamsters are working, but the mouse should also work. Marilena, great to see you again. Eviodium, welcome back. Liam, channel's blowing up, Max. It really, yes, it's I got a lot of new subscribers over the last few days. What happened was, up until the end of last month, the number of new subscribers had stagnated, so it actually had dropped a little bit. Normally the subscribers for YouTube channels increase gradually, and I think for a lot of channels they lost a number of subscribers, and mine also. So I'm very happy to see things picking up again. Mark, Matchbox, great to see you. England Viking, great to see you. Artemis, welcome back, great to see you again. Yanra, welcome. Jeremy, welcome. Tiger, welcome. Chris, great to see you. He-Man, hello. Christopher, Killer, I hope I said hello to Killer. Ian Vincent, welcome. Stanley, welcome. And Simon Carr, great to see you. So I hope everyone is very well. Somebody had asked how are things in Italy, so nothing really has changed since the last live stream on Tuesday. As far as I know, let me see. No, just a few more shops and bars and restaurants have reopened. So on, I think it was on Wednesday, there was a restaurant. There's a restaurant near me, and they seem to have reopened pretty much as they were before. So that's good for them. Christian, great to see you again. You're gaining support because of the picture of the guillotine, perhaps. I hope. I commissioned somebody to do that photo, to do that picture. So he had done some artwork for another channel, and I really loved the artwork on the other channel, so I contacted him, and he said he'd do some artwork for this channel. So he done this one, so I'm going to perhaps ask him to do something else. But I'll see how things go. I'd like to do some work on the live stream, maybe to put some artwork or some videos or something, integrate some videos into the backgrounds, something like that, to make it a bit more interesting for you guys, because you guys make the stream, remember that. So we have now had 2 SAGE members break the lockdown. YouTube stagnation seems to be happening for a lot of independent journalists and commentators. Mrs. VSN, welcome back. Great to see you. Perhaps that's who Cummins is talking about when he said that it'll be a few old people die. Maybe. Sam Priest, welcome. Jersey, welcome. Can we furlough Boris for 3 months? Let's hope so. My son Miles is watching also, but he's not got an account, so you can say hi to him, please. Sure. Hi, Miles. I hope you're well. Welcome to the stream. Hope you enjoy it. Tonight he is going to be educated. I hope so. No pressure. Andy, great to see you again. So what I'll do is, as usual, jump between the article I have here and your comments. Eddie, great to see you. Hope you're well. I need to change a setting on this. Just a moment. I'm sure the delay is only due to Max not being able to open his liter bottle of spritzer, baby sham to the rest of the human race. Be patient, folks. It's not baby sham. Okay, so this is from Sky News. It's just actually come in a few minutes ago. Let me move this over. So it says here, Labour demands explanation after reports Dominic Cummings broke lockdown rules. Where do they find these photos of Dominic Cummings? It always looks like, no offense to homeless people, but he always looks like a homeless guy. Labour is demanding a swift explanation after reports that the Prime Minister's chief advisor Dominic Cummings broke lockdown rules. It follows reports tonight in The Guardian and Mirror that Mr. Cummings was seen in Durham, over 250 miles from his London home, despite having had symptoms of COVID-19. Sky News has approached Downing Street and Durham police for comment. And that's all we have at the moment. So, of course, he should resign. You know, he's the one making the rules for everyone else. If ordinary people break the rules, they receive a fine. They could even end up in prison. So why is he not even resigning? I hope he resigns, of course. I think he's extremely damaging in the position that he is. He has no place on the SAGE committee. And he has really no place in government either. So I think he should resign for this. He's rocking my style, middle class homeless. Dom the freak. How's the cafe life in Italy right now? Cafe life is a little bit sad. I keep meaning to do this, and if I remember, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll take a photo and I'll post it on YouTube so all of you can see it. But when you enter, you have to put some hand sanitizer on, put on some gloves, and then enter. But the number of tables, for example, in my local cafe, I think they had originally about 10 tables. Now there are about 3 or 4 tables. So they have to maintain social distancing. And they have tape on the floor so that everyone knows where to stand and where not to stand. It's a little bit sad because you lose the feeling, the atmosphere. The atmosphere is much more subdued. The staff are friendly and jolly as usual, but it is a little bit sad to enter and have to follow a line on the floor, and you have to maintain at least 1 meter distance from the person who's taking the cash or giving you the coffee. It's a little bit sad that. I hope things will eventually return to normal, but maybe they will not. Somebody said Dominic Cummings is like Grima Wormtongue. He's like Rasputin without the beard. It's not lives. He was seen with I didn't see the rest of the comment. Artemis. Max Bedroom PCs, welcome. Great to see you again. Oh, I miss the cafe life in Europe. And also pub life. I don't know how pubs are going to survive in the UK. And in Northern Europe, the whole pub life is going to completely change. And I imagine some pubs and restaurants will not be able to survive because they require full capacity. Yeah, 25 to 40% of tables, with even less to get seated. Imagine the revenue they can make. Yeah, its revenues are way down. Max, maybe it's easier for you to start videos on talk radio presenters who don't speak utter bollocks. Are there any? Do you think Dominic Cummings is going to become the next PM? Oh my god. Well, he has the qualifications now, but I don't think so. I hope not. Facts trump prejudice. This is one normal for us to go back to. People sleeping in the streets wasn't normal. Children living in poverty. Yeah. I'm in a very small village in Spain. It's the same. Most pubs and restaurants require full capacity to be sustainable. Margins aren't that high as people think. Yeah, because of rents are very high, and to get people to work in the evenings or to do certain shifts, I think, can be quite expensive. And then you also have insurance, and as far as I know, rents are probably the biggest cost for many of those businesses. QA Library says, have you read the school's evidence released? I read some of it, and it makes and it means jack shit. There's no science or anything there. I expected more from a high schooler. So this is about the government saying, or the SAGE committee saying that schools are safe to reopen, but the trade unions are saying no, we don't want to go back into the schools because we don't trust SAGE, which is different from saying we don't trust the government. To say we don't trust SAGE is extremely damning, because at least we could say, okay, SAGE is presenting scientific evidence, and then the government are manipulating that. But if you have someone like Dominic Cummings sitting in on the SAGE meetings, then how do you know that the SAGE committees are actually presenting scientific evidence? Dominic Cummings has no intention of entering politics. 0. No, I don't think he would run as a politician. It's not his field. Governments are too busy pouring money into propping up existing inequalities and building up businesses that have already made their shareholders rich. Yes. In the US, they've spent $3 trillion propping up businesses. Even the oil industry got a bailout. The oil industry, the industry that we should be moving away from. This should be the moment that the fossil fuel industry dies. We should be moving towards renewable energies, and they get some of that $3 trillion. Sir Antonius Block, welcome. Great to see you again. Hope you're well. Pubs over here are selling off the booze cheaply and even delivering. Never better time to be drunk than now. Yeah, here in Italy, the pubs, now they're open. No, they haven't opened yet. Pubs, actually, I don't know. But until now, they were providing a delivery service. You could have your beers and pub food delivered to you. Because here in Italy, it's a little bit different than the UK. In the UK, you normally have your meals, your pub meals at lunchtime. But here in Italy, the pubs normally open at around 7:30 or 7 o'clock, and then they provide pub food such as club sandwiches or burgers or chips or pizza or what else, things like that. And now they're actually delivering it, but I don't know if they're going to go back into opening up again. But they required the premises to be full, so it'll be interesting what they are going to do after this. Tom, welcome. William, great to see you. In the States, will be reduced to McDonald's and Burger King. Mom and pop restaurants will close. Yes. Because if they haven't closed already, I think social distancing is going to create a big problem for them. But I have seen, I think it was in Michigan, where they have reopened, and a lot of restaurants are full again. I may actually show a video of that later. It's quite surprising. The thing is, the science for school is out of date, and it's not even been peer reviewed yet. It should be rejected. Reports summary results between 6th of February and 19th of April. See, that's once again the lack of transparency from the government. They don't actually say when this information is from and why it should be listened to. Here in Barcelona, its metropolitan area will enter phase 1 of the coronavirus lockdown descaling process from Monday. Okay, that's good too. At least they're moving out. I know there was a difference between Madrid and other parts of Spain. Barcelona and other parts of Spain. I haven't understood clapping from the start. As I said, the clapping was an attempt to distract. It was an attempt to show that, to distract from what the government was doing. So if the people were clapping for the NHS, they were not looking at what the government were doing. And in a way, it let the government off the hook, because people were distracted. People were out, clap, 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 and not consider what the government were doing. And in a way, they were able to lend support to the NHS staff, but not in a way that would actually benefit them in their real lives. Because if you care about the NHS staff, you'll be demanding that they would receive more money, that they wouldn't be suffering a pay freeze. Oh, sorry, I need to add something. The alert box. So guys, remember to hit the like button. We get more people up onto the stream. Wow, we're up to 133. That's fantastic. It'd be fantastic if we could hit 200 tonight. I'd be very happy with that. So would the hamsters. Suzanne, welcome. Great to see you again. I'm worried that small, cozy ale type pubs are going to suffer the most. Witherspoons would probably be okay, as most are large establishments with vast open spaces, much to my dismay. Yeah, these chains would probably be okay because they can raise cash through financing, but small pubs that require, I remember they were in Ireland. There was the smallest pub in Ireland, which would host about maybe 4 people or something like that. That wouldn't be able to stay open, of course. How would you maintain social distancing in there? And I remember when I was a child, when I was living in Ireland, a lot of the old, the pubs for the old guys, the old men, they would be packed. Leon, thank you very much. Well done. A diamond, wow. They've been testing COVID transmission with unmasked hamsters. Globe twig. So thanks to Leon for that. You can hear the wooden spoons hitting the saucepans from about a mile away. So just about it was an attempt to allow people to support the NHS without actually supporting the NHS staff in a way that would actually benefit the NHS staff by allowing them more money, by increasing their by improving their conditions. But instead of fighting for their conditions, their rights, you instead just cheer. It doesn't cost you anything. And the politicians, if they're seen cheering too, they can somewhat benefit from the positive energy, which is quite disgusting, because at the same time they don't give a crap about the actual NHS staff. Max is enjoying, so sends you a diamond. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Miles. They're reopening in North Carolina. I'm studying status quo with stay at home. So this reopening in the United States is extremely worrying. So I'll just show you why it's extremely worrying that things are reopening in the US. Just find just reopen it here. Not this one. Apologies, I don't know why my browser shows this all as black for some reason. So this is new cases. In Italy, we're down to 642 new cases per day. So that's the latest details we have up until yesterday. It doesn't actually include today's for some reason, but it's up to the 21st of May, 642 new cases. If we look at deaths in Italy, we're at 156. So it hasn't dropped to zero yet. I was hoping we would get closer and closer to zero, but it seems to have leveled off at about 100 or 200 deaths per day, which is still worrying, but it's a great improvement. So if we look at the United States instead, let's look first at new cases. So new cases at 25,000 new cases per day. 22, so they haven't declined. They've stabilized, but it's a huge number of new cases every day. Now, of course, the number of deaths, while it's somewhat declining, gradually declining, it's 1,200 yesterday. The problem is this does not include people who have died in the community, people who have died in care homes or nursing homes. So we could almost double this figure because of so many people who are not being counted. But I think just looking at the new cases, it's extremely worrying that many states in the US are reopening. Wee Scott's Dog, great to see you. David, welcome. Cape Town, great to see you. So we see these 25,000 new cases yesterday in the US. This is extremely worrying. And I'm very concerned about the fact that many states have reopened and are very close to reopening. I think about 9 states altogether have reached the threshold required by Donald Trump's administration to consider reopening. But I think all states apart from, I think it's Connecticut and another state have decided to reopen. So it's going in the wrong direction, I'm afraid. Just back to your comments, I like Trump's decision about places of worship. It's very popular in the US, says Larson. Why? Is it a good idea to reopen places of worship? Is it necessary? When we have 25,000 cases per day, you shouldn't be reopening anything. You should be closing down more, because you haven't reduced the numbers. You haven't taken control of this pandemic. It's out of control here. The numbers have stabilized, but they're still. Let's see how many cases has the US had so far. This is still on Italy. Change this to the United States. So it's 1.63 million. So the other day I was actually looking, it was 1.5 million. Now it's 1.63 million cases. 311,000 have recovered, and 95,000 deaths. So it's up from, I think, yesterday. I think I looked at, that was yesterday. So the US is probably going to hit, 100,000 by sometime next week. Or if they're unlucky, maybe at the very early part of next week. So this is extreme. How is this a victory? How is this the time to be reopening? Should be as I said, closing more places, not actually opening more states. Didn't Trump say that they were under 60,000? They would be under 60,000. Yes, he said that back in April, I think it was. Yes, but Max, remember, they only have cases because they test. If they didn't test, they'd have less cases, as Trump says. That's common sense. It was a badge of honor to have, 1.6 million cases. It was actually 1.5 million when he said it, so it's actually gone up 100,000. It was a badge of honor to have 1.6 or 1.5 million cases. It's insane. You just look, we have the biggest number. Yay, we're number one. Victory. They care about safety and will. Some people are fools, but our churches will be very careful with their congregations. Well, how many? I saw a case of a church in the US where the pastor was telling people that it was all a hoax, and then he got infected himself. Now, I don't know whether he survived or not. I hope he survived. But if he got infected and some of his parishioners got infected, then he wasn't giving good advice. He wasn't caring about his parishioners. Trump said all places of worship will open. Why? Look at this, 25,000 new cases yesterday. Why would you reopen? If you have closed and the number of cases still haven't gone down, he died. Okay, thanks, Tom. If the number of cases aren't going down, then why the hell are you reopening? Please, somebody tell me why it's a good idea to reopen if the number of cases haven't declined. In China, they decided to reopen when the number of cases had reached almost zero, or it may have actually been zero. Today, 45 declared churches are essential. This is because of politics. This is not about essential services. This is not about getting the country back on its feet. This is about Trump playing to his base, the religious fundamentalists. He needs them if he wants to win. So how do you maintain their support? by telling them you're on their side. You're going to open the churches. Because the average person doesn't understand the problem. The owners of the churches, the pastors, these preachers and evangelical leaders, they understand the problem, but they don't care about their parishioners because for them it's money and power. They need to maintain the cash flow and they need to maintain their power. So if a few of their parishioners die, it's a cost. It's a sacrifice they're willing to make. But they'll be safe because they have whatever they need. And they'll probably maintain some sort of distance from their parishioners. You know, if you're up on the stage, you're far away from the sick. But once again, it's about maintaining power, and Trump needs the evangelicals on his side if he wants to win in November. He can't win without them. Didn't Jesus tell someone not to pray in public, pray in private? Is actually a sin in the medieval religion. Yes, it is actually, it was in the Bible. Jesus said to pray in private, not in public. Now, to the defense maybe of the Christians, so I play devil's advocate, no pun intended. He probably said it at the time because the Christians were persecuted, so it was necessary. Oh, has Miles left? I'm sorry. Okay. Take care, Miles. Max, what is the football situation in Italy? As far as I know, the football situation, I think they're going to start playing football matches, but without audiences, which will be strange to watch. But at the moment, I haven't heard anything about football matches, but I think that's the direction they're going. Max, you can't be talking about all religions. About what I was saying about the money and power. No, that's mainly the evangelicals. So Trump needs the evangelical vote. Jesus taught to pray Our Father as corporate prayer. Corporate prayer. Hit the like, folks. Yes, hit that like button. Keep those hamsters in baby shop. Wow, 173. That's great. So I want to show you another article. And actually, no, I think we'll go to my old friend, my Tory crush. Anyone want to make a guess of who my Tory crush is? Before I upload the video, does anyone want to make a guess? Love you for these. Do you think of just giving up on politics and not engaging anymore? I've done recently, and I'm sure my blood pressure can take the nonsense anymore. Yes, I do. But I think it's important to, for some people look to me as a voice. I'm just a normal guy, okay? I don't see myself as that, but if I'm able to channel some of the anger people have, and if you can have a bit of a laugh about it, then I think it's worth it. Not Nick fucking Ferrari, Rees Mogg. You're gonna play all the football matches with sex dolls in the stand. Liz Truss. No, not quite. Some of you may, yeah, some of you have answered correctly.
Good afternoon and welcome to the...
So it's Pretty, the pretty lady. So we're going to see her press conference regarding the coronavirus. So the main issue here is that the introduction of the 14-day quarantine for most UK arrivals. Something that I was talking Ian Duncan Smith, almost Cameron. I'm enjoying Crystal Palace's unbeaten run. The part-time occupant of the White House, currently grounded due to COVID-19, said as well, I tested positive in a negative sense today. Rory Stewart, no. Pretty awful. Pretty awful, yes. I'm being sarcastic, of course, everyone. Okay, you know I don't like Priti Patel. Okay, so let's hear what she has to say. Of course, I'm going to respond. Pretty vacant. I'm going to respond to some of the comments she has. So let me know if you can hear the sound, if the sound is okay.
The government's daily briefing on coronavirus. I'm pleased to be joined this afternoon by Paul Lincoln, the Director General of Border Force, and by Sir Patrick Vallance, our Chief Scientific Advisor. Firstly, I'd like to update you on the latest daily figures. 3,231,921 tests for coronavirus have now been carried out in the UK, including 140,497 tests carried out yesterday. 254,195 people have tested positive, and that is an increase of 3,287 cases since yesterday. 9,307 people are currently in hospital with coronavirus. That is down 14% from 10,781 from this time last week. And sadly, of those tested positive for coronavirus...
Is it really sadly? No, I don't mean to be disingenuous, but does she really feel that sad?
Virus across all settings, 36,393 people have now died. That is an increase of 351 fatalities since yesterday. All our thoughts, prayers and deepest sympathies remain with all those who have lost their loved ones.
But not enough to actually prepare for this in advance. Not enough actually to make sure that the staff who are dealing with these patients and attempting to save their lives have the PPE that they require. But this is going over old ground.
At this time of national emergency, it is crucial that we continue to remain alert and save countless more lives.
Stay alert, guys. Remember to stay alert. You never know when the coronavirus could be ready to pop out and catch you on unannounced. You have to be have your wits about you. You could be walking down the street, minding your own business, and the coronavirus would jump out and surprise you and infect you. That's how dangerous this coronavirus is. You need to stay alert.
And that means doing everything in our power to control this terrible disease, taking the right action at the right time to prevent a second deadly wave. And that is why I'm announcing today the next step in our cross-government approach, and these include temporary public health restrictions at the border. And let me explain why we are bringing these forward, as other restrictions have of course finally started to ease following 2 hard months of lockdown. The answer as to why we're bringing these measures in now is simple. It is to protect that hard-won progress and prevent a devastating resurgence in a second wave of the virus.
Okay, but if you are Teresa Coffey, aka Benny here on the Max, admit it's your secret fantasy. But if you're introducing a coronavirus quarantine now, then why are you opening up the country at the same time? Why are you taking one step forward and then one step back at the same time? I don't understand this.
We are following the science and introducing public health measures that are supported by SAGE.
They keep repeating this mantra. We're listening to the scientists. We're following the science. It's as if they need to convince people that this is the truth. Why do they keep repeating that? If it was a given, then you wouldn't have to keep saying it. Remember, we're following the science. Remember, we're listening to the scientists. We're not making our decisions by ourselves, okay? So listen very carefully when I say this. I'll repeat it again. We're listening to the scientists. They're the ones giving us the advice, okay? For anyone in a future public inquiry, listen carefully.
This will require international arrivals to self-isolate for 14 days. That is the incubation period of the virus.
So this is, again, something that was criticized by Michael O'Leary. I'm no fan of Michael O'Leary, but he criticized this. Michael O'Leary is the CEO of Ryanair. And he said, this is unworkable. People arrive in the country and they're asked to self-isolate in their homes or in wherever address they're going to. But of course, the problem is they get off the plane, they go through the terminal, meeting with people. They are given a document to say, okay, you're going to self-isolate. Now, I don't know if they're tested. I haven't seen this, so maybe she will say if the people who are test positive are asked to self-isolate, or just people coming in. If it's just people coming in, well, maybe that's even better. But the problem is, people will come into the airport. Will leave the airport. Sorry, they'll get on a bus. They'll get on a plane, on a tram. They'll get on a underground. They'll get on a whatever. They get in a taxi, and they'll meet hundreds of people. They'll get into contact with hundreds of people by the time they get to their final destination. And then they'll self-isolate for 14 days.
So that if people have become infected overseas, we can limit...
Sorry, drums to the bass, welcome, great to see you. Marty G, welcome. Sorry, say hello to everyone who's just come on. Zoe Castles, what happened? 40 minutes. Been waiting 40 minutes. Oh.
The spread of the virus at home. And as we are taking this action, we are taking it at a time when it will be the most effective. Passengers' arrivals have been down by 99% compared to the previous year. Now we are past the peak of this virus. We must take steps to guard against imported cases, triggering a resurgence of this deadly disease. And as the transmission rate across the United Kingdom falls and the number of travellers arriving in the UK begins to increase, imported cases could begin to pose a larger and increased threat.
Okay, but are you going to test people when they arrive? That's what's important. Asking people to self-isolate isn't going to do anything, because people will, as I said before, will come into contact with others as they get to their final destination, a home, a restaurant, a hotel, a bed and breakfast, whatever it is. And then who's going to enforce that quarantine, that self-isolation?
This is because they could become a high proportion of the overall number of infections in the UK and therefore increase the spread of the disease. So with far fewer people being infected in this country, and with the public having worked so hard to bring the R number down, any new arrivals entering the country with the disease during this next phase will have a much bigger impact, potentially causing a second wave. Now, this is, of course, a different story from when domestic transmission was at its peak and when overseas travel was at an all-time low.
Again, so what you're saying is that there wasn't a quarantine because there weren't enough people. So the numbers coming in were tiny, so they didn't bother to quarantine. So now that the numbers are increasing, they're asking people to quarantine. But are these people going to be tested?
Led by the Prime Minister, the whole government has worked across all government departments, including with the...
Sempri says, so you have to stay in your hotel room for 2 weeks. Allegedly, yes. That seems to be the point of it. So, come to Britain, we're reopening for your holidays, but you're not allowed out to the beach. You have to stay in your hotel room for 2 weeks. Who's going to go on holiday and stay in a hotel room for 2 weeks? Might as well stay at home. You can do what you want, at least at home. Hi, Levy, welcome. This doesn't make any sense to me.
Devolved administration to develop these measures, and we do not take these steps lightly. This is extremely challenging, and these are difficult times for the entire nation, as our freedoms have been sadly but necessarily curtailed.
Okay, but are you going to test these people? I'm sorry if she has already said it. I haven't heard her say that. Tests are absolutely pointless in the context of travel. Why? Why are they pointless? If people are coming into the country, there is an actual test Bosch have a test that will produce results in about 3.5 hours? Why not wait until the numbers of cases in the country have arrived close to zero, and then you can start opening up the airports? Why are they opening up the airports at the same time as they're opening up the rest of the country and then saying we're going to quarantine?
But we do not underestimate how hard these new restrictions will be for people up until...
Did not mention tests, Max. No, I haven't heard her mention tests. So they're not going to test anyone. So they're going to ask people. This is once again the same attitude as before. Ask the public to do the job because we can't be bothered to do the job. We don't have the resources to do the job. So we're going to ask people to voluntarily self-isolate. They're going to talk about, I read something about fines for people, but who's going to impose these fines? Would they have a database of all the people who have come in, where they're staying, and how long they've been in the country, so that the police can go there and check if they are self-isolating? Really, are they going to do that?
Down the country, and also those who've already sacrificed so much to help beat and drive down the spread of coronavirus.
So this is very interesting. So she's talking about how the public have done their duty. The public have done a hard job. They have kept the numbers down. Once again, there's no mention of what the government has done. Not because they believe they've done nothing, but this narrative is to put the responsibility of the control of this spread on the public. Because if things go badly, the public are to blame. If things go well, the public, yay, you did very well. But it's the government's job to control the spread of the virus, because they have the ability to impose laws. They have the ability to impose a lockdown. They have the ability to send out the police or the military if necessary.
And I know that families both at home and abroad are desperate to be reunited. But by taking these steps, we could save many more lives by making it possible for more family and more friends to safely be reunited in the future. We also recognise how hard these changes will be for our travel sector and leisure sectors, who are already struggling through these unprecedented times. So across government, we will continue to work with them and support what is an incredibly dynamic sector to find new ways to reopen international travel and tourism in a safe and responsible way. We will review these temporary public health measures every 3 weeks to ensure they remain the right ones for our roadmap to recovery. And these measures will be introduced from the 8th of June, so that people arriving in the UK will...
The 8th of June? Let me just check the calendar. The 8th of June is almost 2 weeks away. Why are you waiting another 2 weeks to implement this quarantine? Why aren't you doing it immediately? You're saying, we have to do this, sadly we have to implement this quarantine, it's necessary. Why are you waiting another 2 weeks to do it? It's like when Boris Johnson was saying we're going to start the tracing, the contact tracing. We're going to start it next month. Why next month? Why are you waiting so much time? Why are you waiting so long to do things? You're late as it is, and the action you're going to take that should have been taken weeks ago, you're going to add an extra few weeks. Why? Is it under... I'm trying to think of why they're doing this. Maybe it's we tell people now this in the hope that when the time arrives, they will have forgotten about it and we'll have a new story to sell them. It was like the testing. Or first it was the ventilators. We're going to have all the ventilators you need. Then they realized that PPE was also a problem. Then they said, yeah, we're going to have lots of PPE. Then ventilators were forgotten about. Then then the issue moved on to testing. Actually, we're going to have lots of testing. What about PPEs? Well, forget about PPEs. We're going to have lots of testing. Now, contact tracing. Now, quarantine. What will be the next story? In 2 weeks' time, they will be talking about something else. What will it be?
Will be required to self-isolate for 14 days, except for those on a short list of exemptions. Arrivals will be required to provide contact and address details to help trace them should we need to. And given the amazing public spirit and the level of compliance we have seen so far, we expect the vast majority of people to do the right thing and comply with these new requirements.
Why would they? If somebody's coming to the UK for a holiday, this is different from staying at home. People stayed at home because they were asked, as a community, you have to stay at home. If somebody's coming to the country for a holiday, the objective of having a holiday is to have a good time, to visit places. It's completely different to asking someone to stay at home. It doesn't make any sense. You're asking people. You're going to say, okay, we're going to ask people for their address, their contact details, and then we're going to check on them that they're self-isolating. But please do come do come here for your holidays.
We know.
Sorry, wouldn't it just make more sense to keep the airports closed until the numbers had come down sufficiently?
That the vast majority of people will continue to act responsibly to control the spread of this virus and to stop a second wave.
But I'm sorry, but why would tourists care about that? I'm not beating on tourists here, but if you open the gates for tourists, if you open up the airports for tourists to come to the UK, sorry, Max, it's not just people coming to the UK on holiday. Some apply to the UK holidaymakers. Some apply to UK holidaymakers come back. James Andrew has subscribed. So I don't understand. So there's also people returning. But asking people to self-isolate, I don't see how it's workable. If it's a small number of people, if we're talking about hundreds, then I could understand. You could say, okay, we're going to have a task force who will go out and check that these people are self-isolating. I don't know how you're going to check. Is it you go there every day? Are you going to do spot checks? How are you going to check that people are self-isolating for 2 weeks? If they say, I arrive on the Monday and then I leave on the following Monday after 2 weeks, 2 weeks after that, would you check that they self-isolate on the first week and on the second week on a Wednesday afternoon or something like that? How are you going to check people?
But we will not allow a small minority, a reckless minority, to endanger us.
Sorry, is a bit off. He-Man asked, do you think there's a civil war brewing in the US? Yes, but I'll come back to that another time, and after this video perhaps.
So there will be penalties for those who break these mandatory measures. Border Force will be on the front line of implementing the changes with spot checks as people arrive in the UK. And Paul Lincoln, the Director General of Border Force, will shortly speak to us, and he'll provide an update on the steps that people will need to take. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank our Border Force staff and our officers for the role that they will play and for all that they are doing to protect our nation at this deeply challenging time. We are working across all 4 nations of the UK to make these public health measures work.
Sorry, Suzanne says, so Max, average worker 2 weeks on continent means 4 weeks off work for 2 weeks holiday. What about probation? That's what probation services do. Unless this is an attempt to provide some sort of business to private companies. Okay, the private companies, we want you to go out and check that these people are following the rules. But if it's from the point of view of tourism, you're saying we need to reopen our tourism sectors. We need to reopen our hospitality industry. But if you're asking people to reopen their hospitality industry, then why are you asking them to self-isolate? Okay.
But I'll now turn to the enforcement approach that is being taken here in England. We will conduct spot checks by mid-June to ensure that people are self-isolating, and those from overseas who refuse to comply could be refused entry. Public health.
So people who refuse to comply will be refused entry. I don't understand. If somebody has entered, they're in a hotel, they leave the hotel to go to the beach. What do you mean they'll be refused entry? Re-entry, I assume you mean. They will not be allowed to re-enter the UK at a later stage.
Health England will set up an assurance service to contact people at random to ensure that they understand the requirements and to also ensure that they are self-isolating. And our outstanding police will continue to do as they've done diligently across the country to engage, explain and encourage people to follow the rules. We will empower them to use enforcement as a last resort. So anyone breaking their 14-day quarantine could face a penalty of £1,000, and that will be a fixed penalty notice. And ultimately, that could also go into potential prosecution and an unlimited fine for failure to comply with these sanctions. We will keep these penalties under review and will be unafraid to increase them if that is required. But have no doubt we are taking these measures at the right time because we're serious about saving lives and controlling the virus.
Then if you're serious about saving lives and controlling the virus, then why the hell are you opening the airports? Is it really necessary at this stage? I understand you want to move out of the lockdown, but you haven't arrived at a stage that makes it safe, which isn't safe to leave the lockdown. The numbers have not declined enough. I can show you the numbers later. Not you guys, but not Pretty here. She knows the numbers. She read the numbers at the beginning. It's not safe to leave the lockdown yet. If the numbers had declined sufficiently, then we could start saying, okay, we're going to reopen the country. But you need a means of testing at the airport. You need controls at the airport to see who is infected. And send them back if they are infected. Isolate them at the airport. Have a holding pen or something for them. But you can't be allowing people to leave the airport infected, mix in the community, and then finally self-isolate with the risk of a fine or a spot check later on.
And we will be guided by the science, and the public health of the public and the country will always come first.
Then why don't you release this science? You're always talking about how we're guided by the science, but you never actually release the scientific advice that was given to you. Why don't you do that? Previous governments have done that, but you refuse to do it.
Which is why
Night Raven, welcome to the stream.
we are implementing these restrictions at the border.
Sorry, welcome also to Landon.
Now, our absolute priority remains to stop the spread of this infection, to save lives, and to stop and prevent a second dangerous wave of this virus.
It's almost as if she's preparing the ground for a second wave. It's like she knows that a second wave is coming, and she's saying we as the government are doing everything we can to stop it. Good night, Suzanne. Stay safe. Trump Pence 2020. Oh, we're in for some interesting comments. So, but it's almost as if she knows that there's a second wave coming, so she's preparing the ground she's preparing for who to be blamed. Well, we did everything we could. We told the government, we told the public to self-isolate. We told the public to to stay alert. But they didn't stay alert, and we got a second wave. They didn't wash their hands enough. We got a second wave.
That also means supporting our NHS and making short-term sacrifices together to stop coronavirus taking more lives. I'm now going to hand over to Paul Lincoln from Border Force, who will update us. He'll provide an operational update, but also talk about the measures and how they will be implemented. Thank you. Paul.
Thank you, Home Secretary. Before we consider the health measures at the border, let me start by paying tribute to Border Force officers and staff, saying how proud I am for the professionalism and dedication which has been shown during this pandemic. In some areas, the context of our work has changed. This most prominent area, of course, is in air passenger arrivals, where, as the Home Secretary has said, at times they have been down 99% compared with the previous year. But elsewhere, the work has continued relentlessly. So despite the threats and challenges posed by coronavirus, Border Force staff have been working tirelessly, day in, day out, in ports and airports, hand in glove with operational partners such as the National Crime Agency and counter-terrorism policing.
I actually feel sorry for these people because they are on the front line, and I don't know whether they have access to sufficient PPE, because they have to be dealing with members of the public. So they should have... The sound is very low. Apology, Night Raven. I'll try and do... Let me see. Okay, it should be a little bit better now. Unfortunately, I increased all of the volume, so hopefully you don't lose your hearing from my speaking. Can't stand the sound of this woman's voice. Nice, Max. I'm sorry, Chica. Do come back again soon. Apology. Well, now we have someone else, so you shouldn't be able to hear her anymore. Max, try to see the video A Different Bias Made Today. It's both about the pandemics and Brexit. It was a leaked document on how the disaster UK is heading against. It's also the left channel only. I don't know why there's... Let me see if there's something I can do. No, apologies, it's the left channel only. It's beyond my control, unfortunately. I'll try and have it fixed for the next stream if possible. The damn hamsters.
And this is to keep the country safe and facilitate the repatriation of UK nationals from abroad. Throughout this crisis, they've remained on the front line, and they have needed to. Organised crime groups and those who wish to do the country harm take every opportunity that every crisis provides, and we have seen some abhorrent attempts to exploit vulnerable people as a result of coronavirus. So as an organisation, we have turned to face the threat. Last month alone, Border Force seized more than 700 kilograms of cocaine and heroin destined for our streets, some of which were concealed inside shipments of face masks. In the last few days alone, we see significant amounts of contraband, including an AK-47 assault rifle, ammunition, nearly £500,000 of illicit cash, and 20 tonnes of smuggled tobacco.
And that was just Nigel Farage.
We've also intercepted thousands of counterfeit COVID-19 tests, continuing our battle against those who are proliferating from this pandemic. And between the 21st of March and the 15th of May, our officers referred 84 consignments of face masks to trading standards as otherwise counterfeit or otherwise below standard. We're also continuing to work against illegal migration, and in 2019-20, Border Force stopped over 30,000 illegal entry attempts at our juxtaposed controls overseas. But as well as tackling these criminal threats and working to keep illicit shipments out, the pandemic has highlighted the importance of working to expedite the entry of those items into this country that the country critically needs. Border Force has facilitated the importation of medical equipment and PPE for the NHS, for care homes and the police, as well as 220,000 laptops and tablets, which the Department for Education...
Okay, I don't know if this is very interesting for you guys, so I might just skip ahead to the science. Let's say here, from the science instead.
While still facilitating in the critical trade into this country.
Thank you, Paul. Patrick.
Yes, can I have the first slide, please? I want to start with some numbers, and on the right-hand side of this slide is the R, and to remind you, that is the number that determines or is driven from the number of individuals infected by one infected person on average. And so uncontrolled, this epidemic has an R of 3. It means 3 people on average are infected by one person, and the epidemic grows very rapidly. If it's 1, then one person is infected by one person, and it's flat. We're currently at an R across the UK of between 0.7 and 1, below 1 in every area of the UK, we think, but potentially quite close to 1. So the epidemic is either flat or declining at the moment in the UK, and in most areas it's declining, as I will show you. As the epidemic becomes smaller, there are two...
I would like him to actually explain how they came at the R number. Now, I don't know if maybe he will explain it, but I think it would be important to explain how you arrive at the R number. What are the variables used to arrive at that R number?
Two numbers to concentrate on. One is the R, and the other is the total number of infections and the number of new infections. On the left-hand side of this slide are the numbers that come from the Office for National Statistics survey, where they've been to 14,500 individuals and taken swabs to see who's infected and also to see over time who becomes infected. And that's in over 7,000 households.
So 14,000 tests to arrive at the R number. 14,000, that's all. Shouldn't it be a higher number? I'm not an expert, so maybe my criticism, my question is irrelevant. But it seems a very small number to understand the level of the number of tests in order to arrive at the R number.
What that study tells us is that in the 2 weeks from May the 4th to May the 17th, that 0.25%, so roughly 2 or 3 out of 1,000 people are infected and have COVID. That comes to a number of about 137,000 across the country. It could be bigger than that or smaller. These have got wide confidence intervals, but that's the sort of number. The second important number is the number of new infections. So this is people every week who are getting a new infection. And here, the number looks like about 61,000 people per week at the moment, which turns out to be roughly 1 in 1,000 or so people every week are getting an infection. So that's
61,000. Okay. Is that a low number or is that a high number? Is that low enough in order to reopen the country, or is it too high to reopen the country? I'd like to know.
The sort of order we are. The epidemic is shrinking and the numbers will come down, but these are the numbers we need to keep an eye on because...
Okay, so this is my big problem here. If the numbers are coming down, it means that the lockdown is working. So if the numbers have come down to a certain... if the numbers are declining, why the hell would you open up the economy? Why would you open up society? It doesn't make any sense to me. It's like your house is on fire, you call the fire brigade, and they arrive and they start pumping water, into your home. And of course you're not going to continually pump water when the fire has been extinguished. There will be probably a point where you can conserve the water in case the fire comes back or it spreads to another part of the house. But at what stage would you say, okay, half of my house is on fire, now let's switch off the water supply? This doesn't make any sense to me. This is what he's basically saying. It's like, or what the government are saying, I should say. The fire is starting to decrease, now let's switch off the water. The numbers are decreasing, they're under control, but that's what they're saying. The numbers are decreasing. Now let's open up the economy again. Let's open up society. Let's allow people back into beaches. Let's allow people to get back into work. Fill up the tubes, the tube station, the tube trains, the carriages, the stations, buses, trams, everything. Let's go back to normal. Okay, they're not exactly going back to normal, but is it a sufficiently reduced form of normality to say, in comparison to the number of new cases?
The lower we can get these numbers, the more
Sorry, Max, because it's a balance. If they can get new cases low, track and trace can be effective, but they need to balance human needs with that. But they haven't started any tracking and tracing. It's a balance of, but it's a balance, but you need to get the numbers low enough. I agree. If the numbers are low enough, then you can have, then you can say, okay, now we can reopen. But at what stage are the numbers low enough? The numbers aren't low enough. They're starting to decline somewhat, but that's because the lockdown is working. The R number can be very sensitive to small changes. If we open up society completely, the R number goes up to 3, and the 61,000 people affected, affect 183,000 people the next week. Yes. I'm very worried about what's happening here in Italy. We have reopened somewhat in some parts of the country, a lot in other parts of the country, and the numbers of new cases have declined greatly. But I'm not sure if it's enough. Maybe we should wait another week, another 2 weeks. It makes more sense to be more cautious, wait an extra few weeks, than to open too soon and then risk having another wave. As a retired firefighter, I can say you always conserve the water throughout. You would never get to a point where you run out. Every country has to take lessons from China handling this. I would actually say from South Korea instead. Because track and trace is effective if you deal with the big picture first. But track and trace should start at the beginning. Would you not agree? Not at the end. Why did you choose this name? That's a story for another video.
Possible it is to release measures and also to operate the test, trace and contain system that's being put in place. Next slide, please. Just to show you what this means, and I've said repeatedly that this slide is difficult because...
Unfortunately, they're not showing the slides. It would be nice if they showed the slides, but unfortunately, they're not. But Max, people need to feel human too. It's a difficult balance. We need to get our hands on top of... We need to get on top of this virus now. Taiwan is also good. Yes, Taiwan and South Korea are probably the gold standard. But Larson, we need to get on top of this now. I understand we have to make sacrifice. People have made sacrifices. What's the point in throwing everything away at this stage?
The number of cases tested here and the number of people who are positive isn't a reflection of the total number. I've just shown you in the previous slide the total number. But what you can see in this slide is the number of tests being done per day have gone up a lot in the pink columns. The number of people confirmed as a result of that is going down in the green. And this is from 21st of March, where we saw the peak to the top, and now it's coming down. So it's consistent with the idea. The number of infections in the community are coming down day by day, but quite slowly for the reasons I've said.
And good. At least he's telling the truth. The number of infections are coming down slowly. But this is not the time to reopen. If you're succeeding in the battle, you don't walk away. You don't say, okay, we've won, and throw down your guns. You continue to fight, but in a new way. But this is not the way. This is not the time to reopen.
Next slide, please. As you would expect, the number of people infected is going down, so are the number of people admitted to hospital every day. And here you can see right the way across Wales, England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, the number of people in hospital coming down and the number of people on mechanical ventilators, importantly, are coming down. So we've got numbers of people on ventilators reducing, the intensive care patients, and the number of admissions, here the graph shown for England, coming down over time, each day reducing. This is an important indication that the epidemic is shrinking. Next slide, please. People in hospital with the disease are also reducing. And here you can clearly see the peak when you look at these graphs going from the 20th of March through to the 21st of May, most obvious in London, where you can see a peak occurring around the beginning of April and then coming down now day by day. And you can see it's a bit flatter in other places. So it's not decreasing at exactly the same rate across the country, but wherever you look, it is decreasing. There's clearly some work to be done to make sure it's decreasing everywhere. And these last few numbers are going to be hard to get down, but we've got to keep trying to push them down. The lower the numbers, the better.
And once again, the lower the numbers, the better. Then when we arrive at a stage we feel comfortable with, then we reopen. Max, Sky reporting that the discharge COVID-19 tests were altered from positive to negative, and then the patient was sent to a care home. Cold-blooded murder in my book. It's the idea that they were dumping people, infected people in care homes. Someone should be guillotined for that. Because it's like throwing a bomb, throwing a grenade into an orphanage. It's you're taking an infected person, turning them into a biological bomb, putting them inside a care home where there are vulnerable people, and you know that they're going to infect many people there, and many of those people are going to die. And of course, the staff are going to get infected too. Glasgow Kiss, thank you very much. Just saying hello to all the trolls. Hello, trolls. I think I've seen one or two. But you know how to use that hammer. You're like Thor with that hammer. Oh, I didn't get the notification for your super chat. Don't know why that's not working. Okay, let's continue with the professor.
Next slide, please.
Here we go.
And as you would hope and expect, that as those numbers come down, infections, people admitted to hospital, people in hospital, people on ventilator beds, so the number of deaths reduces as well. And this shows the number of deaths from the Department of Health and Social Care numbers. They're a little bit higher if you look at the Office for National Statistics numbers, because these are only COVID confirmed.
Okay, unfortunately, they're not actually showing us any numbers. So let's go back to my good friend Pretty, who's standing pretty, not sitting pretty.
Can we now move on to questions, direct questions from the media? First question is from Tom Burridge, BBC. Good afternoon, Tom.
Good afternoon, Home Secretary. I've got one question for you, please, on the quarantine, and then another question from a colleague about schools, if I may.
So I just want to say hello to a few people who've come on the stream. Electronic Freak, welcome. Mr. Spoon, sorry I didn't say hello to you before. John Hart, welcome. Okay.
Home Secretary, now that this measure is coming in, is it fair to assume now that most summer holidays abroad will not happen this year? And the second question is, while the risks to children are judged to be relatively low if schools reopen, to what extent might they be more serious for families and for the wider community?
Thank you, Tom. Well, I think in answer to your first question, of course, you know, the advice is not about booking holidays right now. We're bringing in these measures for very clear reasons, as I have already outlined this afternoon, and Paul Lincoln has also explained how we're going to bring those measures in. The other point to note as well is, of course, advice from government and the Foreign and Commonwealth office is, you're not to travel, and please follow the advice that they are putting on their website, which is nothing but essential travel. So this is absolutely not about booking holidays. We have to be clear about, we want to avoid a second wave, and that is absolutely vital. And I think in terms of your second question about...
Then close the friggin' airports. If you're telling people we don't want people to go on holiday, then close the airports. We're asking people not to go on. We're going to leave the airports open and then ask people to please don't go on holiday.
Schools and safety around children, reopening schools. I think it's really important to recognise right now, many of our schools are actually open, and many of those schools are doing fantastic work, obviously, providing schooling for children of key workers, but also equally as important, vulnerable children. There are many, many vulnerable children.
Okay, and these schools are running skeleton crews. These schools are dealing with very small numbers of students. It's not business as usual.
Children, hundreds of thousands of vulnerable children who are safer in school in many, many cases. But of course, you've asked the question about infection control and families, and that is, of course, something that has to be looked at, very much in a local setting, at a localised level, but also following the advice from government and the scientific advice, the advice that we've heard from Patrick and from other colleagues as well. And that is crucial, and of course, the Department of Education and other colleagues across government are working on this and looking at this right now.
But you're looking at it at the moment. I thought you were going to reopen the schools. I thought that was something that had been planned. So now you're talking about we're going to look at it. Which is it?
Patrick, did you want to add anything to that?
So the question, you're quite right to frame it as the risks for children of this disease are much lower. We know that. They are very low risk, but not zero risk. And there have been some serious cases in children, of course, but very few compared to adults and older age groups. The broader risk in terms of opening schools is that as soon as you start to reintroduce any contact, then you put some pressure on the R and you put pressure on numbers, and that's true for anything that we're going to do in terms of changes to contact. The judgment early on was that schools are a relatively low part of that risk, although there are other consequentials that happen as a result of opening schools, in terms of people going to business and other contacts, which can add to that. So there are various scenarios that can make risk lower or higher. Things like safe environments are important, things like class size, things like the amount of face-to-face contact. And these are things on which we've given science advice, on which policy can then be determined. But it's worth absolutely reflecting that the overall risk, if you look at it, is not one that you pick out as a high-risk area for R, unlike, for example, the point that was just made around dentistry, for example, where it is. But it's not zero. There clearly is a consequence of reintroducing any form of increased contact.
So why are the government opening the schools? Like, what is the benefit of opening the schools? At this stage, I understand if we were now in September, if we were sitting here in September contemplating, is it a good idea to open the schools? Then I could understand that. But you have about a month left. What is the advantage in scratch and sniff? What is the advantage in opening the schools at this stage for about a month and risking affecting the R rate, the R number? I don't see the advantage of that. I haven't heard any reason for reopening the schools apart from the fact that many parents are being forced, because of the changes in the lockdown, parents are being forced back to work and they need someone to look after their children if they're not at school. So school provided a place for these children to be looked after, and because the schools are closed, that means that they have no one to look after them. So it's a huge problem for and of course daycare is closed and babysitting services are non-existent because of social distancing and all of these other problems. so the problem is not about the R rate. It's not about the infection. It's about, we have asked parents to go back to work, but we haven't provided a mechanism for their children to stay at home. So we're going to send the children back to school. I wish they'd be a bit more honest about this. That seems to be the reasoning behind it. And unfortunately for this guy here, he has to defend the government in a way. He's saying, yes, the number of infection is not 0. It's low, but it's not 0. So I'm going to allow the government to decide whether to open the schools or not. I think if you were to ask him frankly, he would say, no, the schools should not be opened. The tube should not be opened. People should not be going back to work. The number is not sufficiently low for us to make political decisions. Because, as I said before, the scientists will say something like, close down the entire economy. The government will say, we can't do that. What can we get away with? Then the scientists will say, well, if you don't want to close down the entire economy, there's a certain amount of infection you're going to have to accept. Thank you very much, Night Raven. So Night Raven says, my donation to send Pretty on a long cruise. I know there's still a number of cruise ships operating. Fantastic, thank you very much. But once again, if the scientists are saying one thing, the politicians are trying to use that information in a way that they can cherry pick. They can cherry pick some parts of the advice. I'm trying to think of an analogy here. It's like the doctor saying you need to lose weight, and you say, well, if I use a knife to cut off the fat, that would work, wouldn't it? And the doctor said, no, you shouldn't really do that.
Thank you, Tom. I'm now going to move on to Sam Coates from Sky News. Sam, good afternoon.
Secretary of State, 2 questions about this summer. Now, 12 days ago, the governments of France and Britain issued a joint statement which said no quarantine measures would apply to travellers coming from France at this stage. Today, in what you've announced, there's no exemption from France. Can you tell us what's changed over the last 12 days? And also today, Downing Street revealed that they're also looking at easing the measures you're putting in place today by looking at air bridges. They seem to be being pushed by Transport Secretary Grant Shapps. Be honest, are you as keen on that as him? And if so, when's the earliest they could come in? And to Patrick Vallance, sage advice on education actually seems to make pretty depressing reading. If you're asking the question when schools are going to be back up and running completely, back to the way that they were in January, do you think schools will be fully up and running in September, or should parents start to realise that that's just not going to happen?
Sam, thank you. Well, first of all, on France, I can say to you directly and to the country as well, that over the last 12 days, myself and other colleagues in government, in fact, I speak to my French counterpart frequently on a range of issues, and I've also been involved in many of these discussions.
As a Brexiteer, that's interesting.
The fact of the matter is that we have been working closely with the French government and authorities. Border Force have also been involved in finalising much of these arrangements. There are limited exemptions, and that's in the list that will be published this afternoon, which, when it comes to France, involves frontier workers and preserves the critical supply of goods, which is exactly what we have been discussing with our French counterparts 12 days ago and have continued to do so. We'll continue to engage closely with our French colleagues. We do that all the time across government, and that is the right thing to do, while also keeping this list and all measures, as I've already said in my statement earlier, under review. And you've asked again about travel, which I can fully appreciate and understand. The nation wants to start getting back to living a normal life in the best possible way, hoping to look forward to the summer and potentially travel all on holiday. I've already said the fact of the matter is we're not advising when it comes to travel, and the Foreign Office advice is very clear, nothing but essential travel. And when it comes to air bridges, look, I think we should be absolutely open to all ideas. This is not for today, but this doesn't mean we should rule this out in the future. And the fact of the matter is, I spoke in my statement, in my remarks earlier on, about the travel industry, the leisure sector, aviation. We're at the forefront of a really dynamic aviation sector in our country. Aviation is in fact the lifeblood when you think about it, keeping people moving but keeping goods moving as well. So we will look at all options, and I and the Secretary of State for Transport, will work with sectors and the industry to look at how we can naturally get the sector moving again. But it's important to emphasise we have to do this in the right way, in a practical way, in a responsible way, and in a pragmatic way, but also when the time is right.
And so instead of actually doing those things, doing it in those ways, you're going to ask the public to self-isolate for 2 weeks. And if they don't, well, we're going to give you a fine.
I think actually we will now look forward to engaging them to develop a plan as to how we can do that. I think we should be looking to lead the world when it comes to reopening aviation, but that's going to take time, Sam, and I think you've also heard that from Patrick today. Patrick.
Well, just to build on that, Chris Whitty has said, and I completely agree with him, this is not a 3-month epidemic. This is a long-term thing that we need to deal with that will require some form of social distancing over a longer period, until we get some form of treatment or vaccine or other intervention which allows us to manage it another way. So this is a long-term thing. I'm not going to speculate.
Sorry, just want to comment. QA Library says, via Phil, so our daily deaths is nearly triple the second highest in Europe. And we're in a much looser lockdown. This is going to go well. The lockdown in the UK seems to be, like, in comparison to Italy, it's extremely loose. I only started to see mask wearing from members of the public in the UK. But I uploaded a video this morning about people on beaches saying, yes, everything's back to normal pretty much. Yeah, it's great to be back enjoying the sun. This is a recipe for disaster.
On when decisions will be made by government on schools, that's for government to decide. But I will say a few words about.
Oh, thank you very much, Stanley. I see Eton College not opening. You took away my thunder, so you did, Stanley. But thank you very much for that comment. I just wanted to say towards the end of this how Eton has decided not to open until September, but different rules apply to opening state schools, so it's not to force parents back to work. Yeah, it's one rule for the rich, one rule for the poor. Unfortunately, has always been the case. Thank you very much for that comment, Stanley. And you're completely right. The idea that Eton is any coincidence that Boris Johnson is an ex-Etonian, and Jacob Rees-Mogg, of course, as well. But it's when will the public realise this? When will they realise that the Tories care more about the rich than they do about their voters?
What the sorts of considerations are that are important. The lower we get the numbers of new infections each week, the greater the chance of being able to do things. The more effective systems like test, trace and contain are, the more room you have to make other changes.
And sorry to be beating the drum again and being, a broken record, but he must have been screaming internally a few weeks ago, a few months ago, when he knew that we should be testing now, back in March, back in February. We should have been preparing for this virus. In March, we should have been tracing, isolating, testing, everything. He must have been going insane because he knew this was what should have been done. And opposite him, on the other side of the table, there was Bozo the Clown, who was saying, yeah, we'll do whatever we want.
The more we can modify environments to be useful to keep appropriate social distancing, the better things are. So there are a number of ways in which decisions can be made based on good scientific principles that allow you to decide when to do things, and they're dependent on those scientific principles and the time at which the data tell you that you've got the room to do them. And those are the sorts of things that I think will need to be looked at in order to make these decisions. And of course, it's really important to remember that within all of that, the basic hygiene things that we've talked about, that we can sometimes forget, hand washing, making sure that we don't forget about that as a route of transmission, become an important part of this. So I think those are the considerations, and then it's obviously important that schools have to get back for education for young people at some point, and the question is how you factor those things in order to be able to make the decision at the right time.
Just a side issue, I think he and the other guy and Priti Patel should have entered wearing a mask, took off the mask, presented their speech, put the mask on, and then left. Now, people may disagree with me and say, well, the mask is now, it's just for show or whatever. But they need to reinforce this in the minds of the public. A mask needs to be worn. You help reduce the transmission wearing a mask. They should have actually had a little bottle of hand sanitizer as they entered, squirted on their hands, wiped their hands, and then began their speech. You may think this is just stupid, it's pandering, but it's necessary. You need to show these things to the public. You doing it would be fixed in people's minds. They say, wait a minute, what is he doing? Oh, look, he's sanitizing his hands before the speech, and maybe do it again at the end. To reinforce the idea this is important. They should have worn a mask when they arrived, took off the mask, gave the speech, put it back on again, and left, to show that wearing a mask is important. Get the public seeing it. Get it into the mindset of the public. I don't understand why they're not doing that.
An era where we're going to have social distancing for some time.
Sam, thanks very much. I'm now going to move on to Liz Bates from Channel 4. Liz, good afternoon. Liz, you are on mute. Okay.
Sorry, I don't mean to be laughing at Liz. It's just a common problem you see when people are doing meetings or anything. It's like when one person is speaking, you put yourself on mute and then you forget to switch off mute.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, I have two questions on the quarantine, if you don't mind. First of all, if people come into the UK and they don't have somewhere to quarantine for 2 weeks, what happens to them? Where do they go? And secondly, if this is a measure that, as you said, is going to save lives, then why is it starting in June? Why are we not starting to save lives immediately?
Very good point.
Liz, thank you for your questions. Well, I think first of all, on your last question, as I outlined in the statement quite clearly, we've said very clearly now that as the number of infections within the UK drops, we have to now manage the risk of external transmission. So more people are now travelling, obviously because other countries are bringing in their own measures in terms of opening up their own countries and society. And so this is now about managing the risk of transmissions being reintroduced from elsewhere. So that's really vital.
That's not answering the question.
And that's why we're bringing the measures in now. We want to reduce the risk of imported cases being introduced to the UK and to prevent and stop a second wave of this dreadful virus. On your question on quarantine...
But you didn't ask, why are you not doing it? You said we're doing it now, but you're not doing it now. You're introducing it in 2 weeks' time. Like if she said, we have to introduce it in 2 weeks' time because we need to get the airports up and, the material available to the airports to get them up and running. We need to get staff trained. We need to do X, Y, and Z, and we need 2 weeks to do that. Then I would accept that as a response. That would be a reasonable response. But she didn't say that. She said, yeah, we're doing it now, basically. But you're not doing it now. The question is, why are you doing it in June? And your answer is, we're doing it now.
keen in and people having somewhere to stay, well, I think it's important to reflect and recognise right now the number of people travelling to the UK are at an all-time low, 99% down compared to this time last year.
Okay, sorry, I'm going to allow her to speak, but she said, so the numbers are down. Okay, no, I better let her speak.
Paul Lincoln, Director General for Border Forces, already said in his statement too that this will come in, I've said this, on the 8th of June. We are effectively now working to communicate, obviously around the world, but through all the appropriate channels, what the processes are that people will need to do, the steps to complete a locator form, and also to provide data, and to get ready to, if they do want to come to the UK, they need to have that accommodation.
We Scott's Dog, thank you so much for that kind donation. So it's Don with his abandon could stand on his head. How Landon's been tanned on. His man Don's sunbed. I saw the comment you wrote before about how Donald Trump, I think it was you that wrote Donald Trump is a sunbed racist. Also, why does he have pink eyes and orange skin? I never understood. Is it because of the glasses the glasses you wear when you're in the sunbed? Sorry, let's go back to Priti Patel. Thank you very much for that kind donation.
That is vital, and that is very clear in terms of the proposal that we are outlining. Paul, would you like to add to that?
I can build on that if you like, Home Secretary. I mean, the statement itself says that...
Sorry.
Recognise right now. The number of people travelling to the UK are at an all-time low, 99% down compared to this time last year. Paul Lincoln, Director General for Border Forces, already said in his statement too that this will come in, I've said this, on the 8th of June. We are effectively now working to communicate, obviously around the world, but through all the appropriate channels.
Such as? I don't understand. Which channels? Tom has become a Patreon. That's fantastic. Thank you, Tom. Great to see you, and I'll see you in the Discord server. So we'll have some chats and fun in Discord.
What the processes are that people will need to do, the steps to complete a locator form, and also to provide data. And
will this be sent to airports? Well, how will people receive this? So if I want to go to the UK after the 8th of June, how will I receive this information? When I go to book my flight, will I receive this information? Will it be the UK embassy will contact me? How will I receive this information?
To get ready to, if they do want to come to the UK, they need to have that accommodation. That is vital, and that is very clear in terms of the proposal that we are outlining.
So the question was, what if people don't have accommodation when they arrive? And the answer is you need to have accommodation. So couldn't she just say that if people don't have the proper accommodation, they will be sent home? They will be deported. If somebody doesn't have the proper accommodation. So this, to me, tells me that they're not actually going to enforce anything. It's just a sham. It's just a charade. We're going to pretend that we care. And then when people actually arrive and say, well, do you actually have accommodation? Well, I might be staying in this hotel for a few days, and then I'm going to stay in this other hotel for a few days, and then okay, whatever, mate, just go ahead. and stay alert. That's probably what will happen, because she was asked, what if people don't have the proper accommodation? We don't have an answer for that. So, but she could have said, if people don't respect the rules, they will be deported, they will be sent home, or if they don't have the proper accommodation in place, they will be not allowed to pass through and stay in the UK for their holiday or whatever. Surely she has the power to do that.
Paul, would you like to add to that?
I can build on that if you like, Home Secretary. I mean, the statement itself says that if you're unable to provide your own accommodation, then we will arrange as government accommodation for you, which will be at your expense. And we have a service which we can provide in the very limited circumstances where people come in and they don't have accommodation.
Okay, but if you're reopening the airports and people are coming, how many people are going to come in? You said at the moment there are very few people. Okay, that's fine. So the people coming in, if they're not able to organize their own accommodation, you will provide accommodation for. But what number of people are you going to provide accommodation for?
Be well aware that we already
Good night, Suzanne. Take care.
use immigration and other powers, and if people do not have suitable means and they are not capable of paying for their own way in the country, if they're a foreign national, then they are usually removed. So we have these processes in place already. This is a relatively routine thing to be able to take forward.
Thank you, Paul. I'm now going to move on.
Okay, so surely she should have known that. But at the end of the day, he said if people don't have appropriate accommodation for themselves or whatever, they will be removed. They'll be sent back home, I assume.
On to Gordon Rayner from The Telegraph. Gordon, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Secretary of State. Thank you. The government's trying to build a global Britain initiative and attract investment into...
Sorry, just want to say hello to Stuart. In the back of my mind, I had Brexit, because it's the Telegraph. Brexit.
To Britain at the moment to take advantage of Brexit when we finally leave fully. Is there not a danger that in imposing this quarantine scheme at a time when the rest of the world's doing the opposite, you're telling potential investors that Britain's closed for business? And can I just ask the scientists to explain to people watching this why we need to put people under house arrest for 2 weeks effectively, rather than sending them to be tested perhaps for coronavirus? And could people be who've tested positive for antibodies be exempted from the scheme?
Well, first of all, I can answer that. There aren't sufficient tests, so we're not going to test people. But we won't say that. It's cheaper to just ask people to self-isolate. That's the answer. It's cheaper. You know, tests are expensive. They're difficult to find. We have to source them. We don't want to waste them on people who are coming into the country.
Gordon, thank you. I'll start with your first question, which is absolutely a legitimate question. We are, of course, global Britain, and our aspiration as we leave the EU is to be a
Now we're going to the Brexit speech.
Dynamic player in the world, obviously more than open for business, but securing our way when it comes to trade and all sorts of investment opportunities going forward. The fact of the matter is, I think we have to put this into context right now. As I've said already, international travel to the UK has declined dramatically by 99%. There are some very clear exemptions that are being, that list is being published this afternoon. Critical workers, infrastructure workers, key categories are there. These measures will be kept under review, and I really do want to emphasise that. We are not shutting down completely. We are not closing our borders, and I think that people need to recognise that. What we are seeking to do is
So, you're not closing the borders. Why are you not closing the borders? I thought the idea of leaving the European Union was to be able to close the borders, to have the power to close the borders. You look, this is a red herring, because you already had the power to close the borders, but you were banging on for years about we need to be able to close the borders. Now you have the power. You're not closing the borders when it would be legitimate to close the borders. Why are you not closing the borders?
We are seeking to control the spread of the virus because we do not want a second wave of this virus.
Jesus, you keep saying this. We don't want to have a second wave. Once again, repeat the narrative. The problem is the people, not our... We're going to leave the borders open. We're going to leave the airports open. We're going to encourage people to come in. But if the rate goes up, it's not our fault. It's the public's fault. The public didn't stay alert enough. This is disgraceful. It's disgusting.
And if I may, before I hand over to Patrick Gordon, there are some other points here to note as well. This will come in place on the 8th of June. And between now and then, we'll be working with various industries, but also we will continue to work across government, with Public Health England, with the Department of Health and Social Care, to look at, track and trace, testing. By the time
Yeah, we're going to look at it in the future. Really, it's like we're going to reopen, and then we're going to look at how to. You see, like we're going to move back into the house, and then we're going to see about how to put out the fire.
this comes together, we would love to have, and of course we want to have, a plethora of tools that can effectively support these measures of quarantining, but also post these measures, help us to look at how we can, in this measured and responsible way, open society in the long course, so much longer term, but in the right way, obviously based upon the science, based on driving the R value down in the United Kingdom. But first and foremost, we must...
Maria makes a very good point. The problem is with the second wave is the first wave is not over. You freaking numbskull. It's true. There's no point talking about a second wave if the first wave hasn't finished yet. You're still halfway through. It's declining. Yes, that's good. The numbers are declining all the time, if the data is correct. I think the data is off, but it's not off to the point that the numbers are going in the opposite direction. But they are declining. But it hasn't declined enough.
Prevent a second wave of this disease, and that's why we're bringing these measures in from the 8th of June. Patrick.
Sorry, the Blue Penguin says they seem to be working twice as hard to cover their own arses than they are trying to contain. That has always been the case. The problem is to cover our own arse. And why are they doing that? Because they're afraid that later on there will be a public inquiry. And Boris Johnson and Priti Patel and Dominic Cummings, hopefully, and Michael Gove and Matt Hancock will be dragged in front of it, and they will have to explain why they made certain decisions and why they didn't make certain other decisions. And all of this is the theatre before the inquiry. To cover your art, not to say the wrong word, to say that we did everything possible, that the responsibility was not ours, it was the public's responsibility. We gave them the best advice possible. They are the ones that messed up, not us. We listened to the science. We told them that we were following the science. This is all preparation for a major arse covering, or arse covering, I should say.
Answer the testing questions generally about testing. So the reason that a negative test is not very predictive is if you've just caught the disease, you incubate it for a few days when you will test negative. You start to test positive maybe at around 5.
Sorry, so people are asking, where is Boris? He's probably in a fridge.
5 days, sometimes a bit longer, sometimes a bit sooner. And you may be shedding a lot of virus for a couple of days then, and for a few days afterwards. And then you gradually recover and may not shed. So clearly...
Sorry, I just want to let him say this part again, because it's quite important.
So the reason that a negative test is not very predictive is if you've just caught the disease, you incubate it for a few days when you will test negative. You start...
So what he's saying here is you can test negative, but you can be still infected. So this is a problem with somebody who's tested and the result is negative. That's why you need constantly to test people. Because somebody could test one day negative, a week later positive. And but if you test somebody and they appear negative and you say, oh well, then they're not a problem, let them go. There's a risk that they are really positive, and it's not a fault of the test. It's because the virus is incubating, as he said. That's important to remember. That's why it's important to test as many people as often as possible.
Start to test positive maybe at around 5 days, sometimes a bit longer, sometimes a bit sooner. And you may be shedding a lot of virus for a couple of days then, and for a few days afterwards. And then you gradually recover and may not shed. So clearly it depends on the time at which you caught the infection as to when you should expect a positive test. And that means that just testing somebody and saying you're negative doesn't tell you whether somebody's just about to get it in a week's time. So that's the reason for thinking about testing in that way. And your second question about antibody testing, we're much more positive that people who get infections do mount an antibody response. I think that's really quite clear now. The vast majority of people do get an antibody response. And we know that some of those antibody responses at least, and maybe all of them, but we don't know that for sure, but certainly some of them are so-called neutralizing antibodies. In other words, they would you'd expect that to have an effect in terms of viral infection and transmission. What we don't know is how long that lasts for, and we don't know how effective that is in terms of either preventing transmission or preventing infection.
And finally, we have somebody who tells the truth as it is. I respect this man because he's telling the truth. He's not saying, yes, we can do this and we can use this test and it'll be fantastic and it will defeat the virus. No. He's being very careful with his words. He's saying we have these types of tests, and we're not sure about the length of time that, for example, say if you can get tested and say, okay, you've had the virus, you can have the antibodies in your system against the virus, but we don't know how long it will last for. And we're not able to use this data to make proper models. That's why it's very important to listen to the scientists and not listen to the bloody politicians, because the politicians want easy answers that are yes or no. The scientists will say, yes, but there are 100 caveats that I have to add to this. Or no, but there are 100 caveats I have to add to this. That's why it's important to listen to the scientists. The scientists are not telling you what they want you to believe. They're telling you what the science represents. The tests, some tests work to a certain extent, some tests don't work to a certain extent. No test is perfect. No, some people have antibodies, but we don't know how long they last for. They could last maybe for a year, they could last for 6 months, it could be less than that. Maybe it depends on the person who has these antibodies. Maybe if they're a healthy person, the antibodies last for a longer period of time. Maybe it's a person who has recovered, but not to the same extent. Maybe the antibodies don't last as long. But the politicians will never speak in this way because the politicians just want yes, no, right, wrong. That's it. We can do it or we can't do it. That's why it's important to have a scientist talk. Now, unfortunately, the politicians don't always listen to the scientists. They cherry pick what the scientist has to say.
So there's still work to be done to understand, this isn't just in the UK, this is globally, to understand the significance of a positive antibody test. It's likely that it confers some degree of protection, but we just don't know. And we don't know whether it confers your, if you like, immunity against being able to harbour the virus and transmit it. So I think until we've got answers to those questions, and there's work going on now that hopefully will give answers to those questions, I think to start talking about immunity passports and assuming that an antibody positivity gives you complete protection is really very premature.
Very good. Thank you for saying that. He's being honest here. You know, people want to hear comforting information, but he's not providing that. He's providing what the information that's available, and the facts back up what he's saying. The politicians will say, oh, okay, we can run with this vaccine, or we can run with this pill, or we can run with this cure. Listen to what Donald Trump has been promoting over the last number of months and weeks. And in the UK, the same. It seems to be a sort of whack-a-mole. Okay, we have a problem, try this. Oh, it doesn't work, let's try something else. That doesn't work, let's try something. That's the political response. It's not the scientific response.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm going to move on now to Harrison Jones from Metro. Harrison, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Pretty. Thank you. This week, the public have been blamed as huge crowds of people struggled to social distance at beauty spots, notably beaches. But was that not actually inevitable, given that the government told people they could travel wherever they like and sunbathe? And what is your message to local authorities who don't necessarily have the infrastructure to safely support huge crowds? And one more, if I may. Yesterday, you described those working in the NHS and social care as heroes. Many of those heroes were born abroad, and we clap them every week. But would a better way of showing our thanks to those foreign key workers saving lives, including the Prime Minister's, be making them eligible for British citizenship?
Harrison, thank you. So first of all, with regard to your first comment about beauty spots, local authority, public behaviours, well, look, I mean, we're heading into a bank holiday weekend and the weather is good. This is a beautiful time of the year, as we all know, and we all enjoy being outdoors. I think the fact of the matter is the British public have been incredible, absolutely incredible, both in terms of their resilience.
So now we're going to hear, you've been a good boy, here is your lollipop.
But also the way in which they have naturally continued to comply with social distancing, with government guidelines, followed the advice, followed the health advice, continued on the hygiene advice as well. And that's been vital, as we've seen from the graphs that Patrick showed earlier on.
See, the problem is that the government's approval rating is declining. So the response is, well, we need to give the public something, a sweetener. We need to make them happy. We need to let them out and roam free because it will help the approval rating. And then you have the scientist on the other side internally screaming like before, saying, no, we shouldn't be motivated by your approval ratings. We should be motivated by the science. But of course, the give the dog a bone. It's this is the motivation here. It's we need to protect the government. So we've used the stick. Now you have to use the carrot with the public.
In terms of moving past the peak and now trying to reduce and control the spread of this virus. I think it's absolutely vital and important that we continue to do that. It is inevitable that obviously the public will be out and about a lot more, but of course our message is clear for the public. Yes, enjoy being outdoors. We have encouraged people to go out, but we have put a very clear caveat around that. And this is all conditional. You can enjoy being outdoors in the sun, providing you are following the advice, and we continue to stop and contain the spread of the infection. The second point about local authorities is, of course, we are seeing this now become a discussion much more about different parts of the country and the localisation of behaviours, but also controlling the spread of this disease too. And local authorities have an enormous role to play, and they are. I pay tribute to them in terms of the work that they are doing. They've had a great deal of government support also in terms of putting in practical measures too, to continue to support people in the community and to control the spread of the virus. But what I would say is obviously we've got to stick with this, okay? We've all made big sacrifices. We do not want to go back to where we started before, and there is still much more work to do. And in answer to your question, yes, about our NHS heroes and those who are, quite frankly, working day and night right now to save lives and to continue to do amazing work in the NHS.
So are you going to give them British citizenship? Are you going to do that? That would be an honourable thing to do. It wouldn't cost you anything. It wouldn't cost anyone anything. It would be a victimless gesture. No one would lose by giving these people British citizenship. Imagine what it would mean for these people. Who would lose out if you gave NHS staff who are not British citizenship as a thank you for what they have done?
NHS. I've said from day one, actually, the last time that I was here on this podium, that we keep all our immigration measures under review, given these unprecedented times and challenges. I'm also going to say, primarily because I did introduce the Immigration and Social Security Bill in the House of Commons this week as well, which is all about bringing in a points-based system. Our immigration system is incredibly complex, And I think this crisis has demonstrated that and shown the extent of that complexity too. You've mentioned citizenship and changes that we could bring in. That would need legislation going forward. But as I said, we keep everything under review.
So that's basically a no. It's like if you ask your parents, can we go to Disneyland? And they say, we'll see. That's a no. That's an insult to these people. Yeah, we've introduced a points-based system. You've put your life on the line, but you have to remember we don't want undesirables coming in, because I've made promises to knuckle draggers, and we need those knuckle draggers to go out and vote. And if the knuckle draggers don't go out and vote, then I risk losing my job. I don't want to do that. I don't think anyone wants me to lose my job, especially the knuckle draggers. So if the knuckle draggers are not happy, then I'm not happy. So I have to throw some bones, I have to throw some red meat to the knuckle draggers. And helping people who actually save the lives, also including the lives of the knuckle draggers, would be a step too far. Giving these people citizenship would be an honourable thing, but we're not honourable. We're Tories, remember, and I want to be a real Tory, and I can't be a real Tory if I'm actually treating people with respect.
I'm now going to go over to Rob Merrick from The Independent. Rob, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Home Secretary. And in recent days, you've made some announcements that have been widely welcomed, to include hospital porters and cleaners within the bereavement scheme, to waive the immigration surcharge for health and care workers. In each case, the government listened, the government changed its mind. So will you now do the same to give automatic visa extensions to care workers and low-paid NHS staff who are risking their lives at the epicenter of this crisis? Why should doctors and nurses get those automatic extensions but not their colleagues?
Rob, thank you for your question. And again, as I've just said already, the work that we're seeing across the NHS is just absolutely incredible. And I've also just made the point as well that, this is difficult in terms of we've seen the complexities around immigration, but right across the immigration system, through these unprecedented times and challenges, we are supporting frontline health workers, social care workers, and obviously we're finding ways in which we can support other care workers as well across the NHS.
How? Please explain how you're looking after these people. You're not. Yeah, we're doing the best we can. We really care about these people. These people have done a great deal, have given everything to the British people and the British public and the NHS. These people are admirable. We're doing everything we can. What the F are you doing?
Our immigration system is incredibly complex. And
our system is so complex. We could have a simple one where we actually treat people with respect. But we want to make it complex because we need to reduce the number of people coming in. The knuckle draggers don't like going into the local Tesco and hearing someone not speak English. You have to think about those people for a moment. Think about the anger these people have. The likes of, Nigel Farage, who hate to see foreigners in his local pub or in his local town square. It's a real stress for people like that. And we need to do something about it. We need to create a system where people have to jump through hoops in order to eventually die attempting to save the lives of these knuckle draggers.
I've said that I'm looking at various schemes. We keep everything under review. In fact, this point was made earlier this year as well with the Law Commission's own report on immigration rules, where our system is complex. I want to simplify some of these rules, I really do. And so we're now looking at what changes we can bring in, very much in the same way as was announced yesterday around changes to the immigration health surcharge. I'm working across government with my colleagues, including...
Then just eliminate it. Well, it's like... I could eliminate it with the stroke of a pen, but we need to look at how it influences other departments, and we need to see if the right people could be fined or have to pay this surcharge. And it's complicated. I could just remove it But then that would damage the support base of the Tory party. And, you know, we don't want to damage that. We need people to vote for us. We need racists and bigots to vote for us. So if we make the lives of ordinary people coming to the UK better, then who's going to look after those racists and bigots?
Department of Health to look at what we can do in this particular space.
Blah, 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 nothing, nothing, blah, blah, nothing, nothing. That's all she said there. Zero. We're going to do something. We're going to investigate this. And we're going to, you know, at least when Donald Trump talks absolute twaddle, it's entertaining. When she talks absolute twaddle, it's empty.
Thank you, Rob. I'm now going to bring this press conference to a close. But before I do...
that was a complete waste of frigging time. What did we gain from that? At least having the scientists there, we gained something. I'm not so much about... I skipped past part of the report, the response from the guy from not Salesforce, Border Force. I don't know why I said Salesforce. Border Force. And her, like, she... complete waste of time. We actually went in knowing we actually left knowing less than we went in when she speaks. Complete waste of time. Why is she there? Because Boris is stuck in a fridge and he can't get out? At least the scientist, just have the scientist speak. I prefer just to listen to the scientist explain what's happening. I'm sorry to have inflicted that upon all of you. But I want to talk about another issue here, of course, which is very important and which is somewhat related to this. Close that. So I just want to go back to some, before I read this article, I just want to look at some of your comments. Salesforce, that's what I need now. Thank God she's nearly finished. Robespierre, we need better videos of fluffy bunnies and hamsters eating burritos after making us watch that POV. Yes. She's there because she can't fly to Israel. She's not able to get through the complex immigration policy. Sorry, should have more bridges in there. Show us a hamster. Give us a break. Let me see if I can actually. A little bit of a surprise. Well, not a surprise, but. Yes, let's what is it? Maybe I'll lighten the tone slightly for a moment and then we'll move on to the next serious topic.
When you wake up, well, you know I'm gonna be the man who's older to you. And when we go out, well, you know I'm gonna be the man who acts as Putin's fool. When you're suffering, well, you know I'll never be the man who's suffering with you. And if you're Muslim or a Syrian refugee, then you're not welcome in my outright UKIP queue. 'Cause I would tell 500 lies and that I would tell 5 500 more. Just a stone cut 8 and xenophobic violent till we're out the door. If you're working, well, you know there's gonna be all sorts of low paid work for you, because the migrant who does the work that you won't do has been deported and they're back in the EU. If you're a patient with medication overshoot, remember, I'm the reason why it can't get through. Then when you're hospitalised, no one's there to care for you, because half the nursing staff have been deported too. So she won that because there'll be no king food.
Okay, I love that video. I can watch it all day long. Okay, so let's go back to the more serious. But before we go to the next article, I just want to read some of your comments. Seeing Nigel is not an improvement. Perhaps in that context, it's more of an improvement. Let's move down to this article. It's not a very nice article to read, but let's read some of your comments first. Not anywhere as good as the Ian Douglas Smith parody music videos. Speaking of Nigel, he claims that he's caught a number of illegal immigrants on a dinghy setting over to Dover. Call me paranoid, but I'm having trouble believing it, even with the footage. Maybe they're real, maybe they're not. Maybe they were paid actors. The proclaimers are seeking damages. Spot the Muslim following the law of Islam, which requires dressing in a modest manner, modestly, not standing out like a sore thumb wearing his pajamas as a political statement. Patel was prepared to starve the Irish so that they would know their place. Yes, I remember that. It was about, during the Brexit negotiations, there was a risk that food supplies would be affected in Ireland, and he said, I don't starve them, I don't care. If I could give you an extra like, Max, for showing Farage on Joe, but why the hell does Politics Joe keep giving the Duff surviving Hitchens a platform? Yes, Peter Hitchens. Why? I don't understand, especially as he has become somewhat of a joke recently, especially regarding the lockdown. He sounds like he should be writing for Spike magazine or something like that. Okay, so I just want to read part of this article because we're close to the end of the stream tonight, unfortunately, but it's been a pleasure as always. So it says here, UK government using pandemic to transfer NHS duties to private sector. So this is something I was talking about before, how the NHS is being sold off. This is not really news to most people, but the Brexiteers, for example, will always deny it. Boris Johnson has denied it, but it's not news. So the government is using the coronavirus pandemic to transfer key public health duties from the NHS and other state bodies to the private sector without proper scrutiny, critics have warned. Doctors, campaign groups, academics and MPs raised the concerns about the power grab after it emerged on Monday that Serco was in pole position to win a deal to supply 15,000 call handlers for the government's tracking and tracing operation. So once again, I was talking about this in the James O'Brien video. You have these, I think it was the James O'Brien video, but it was one of the recent videos. Sorry, I don't remember which one it was, but it was about the I was talking about the 15 or 18,000 people who have been hired to do the tracing, but 15,000 of them are call handlers. They're not actually medical staff. And you have a private company getting this. So why the hell is a private company winning this contract? Why is there a contract for a private company? Of course, the Tory response will be, well, the private sector is more efficient and it's cheaper. And they donate to us. They said the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, had accelerated the dismantling of state healthcare, and that the duty to keep the public safe was being outsourced to the private sector. In recent weeks, ministers have used special powers to bypass normal tendering and award a string of contracts to private companies and management consultants without open competition. So even if they do provide public services to private individuals or private companies, they haven't had a proper tendering process. So a tender is where it's broadcast to the public. There's a public advertisement of a request, for example, to build a new hospital or whatever, and companies bid, and the best price is chosen by the government or by the department, and that company wins the tender. But if instead what's happening is there's no tendering, they're just handing the contract directly to a private company. So that means that the government is being screwed by default. They're not choosing the cheapest option or the best option. They're just choosing whoever they decide. In recent weeks, Doolittle, KPMG, Serco, Sodexo, I don't know many of these, MITI, Boots, and the US data mining group Palantir have secured tax-funded commissions to manage COVID-19 drive-in test centers, the purchasing of PPE, and the building of the Nightingale hospitals. Sorry, my mouse isn't working. Now the Guardian has sent a letter to the Department of Health to NHS Trust, instructing them to stop buying any of their own PPE and ventilators. Has seen a letter, so the Department of Health has sent a letter to the NHS telling them not to buy. Don't buy your own. Buy the ones recommended by us, our friends in private industry. From Monday, procurement of a list of 16 items must be handled centrally. So this is interesting also because there was attempts to force the devolved governments also to buy equipment centrally. So that's interesting. Many of the items on the list, such as PPE, are in high demand during the pandemic, while others, including CT scanners, mobile X-ray machines, and ultrasounds, are high-value machines that are used more widely in hospitals. Centralizing purchases is likely to hand more responsibility to Doolittle, as well as coordinating COVID-19 test centers and logistics at 3 new lighthouse laboratories created to process samples. The accounting and management consultant giant secured a contract several weeks ago to advise central government on PPE purchases. So once again, this is the government decides, okay, let's outsource this to private companies. Max comments broke at the lockdown post. Yeah, I talked about that at the very beginning of the live stream. I don't know if you were on, but maybe you have more about that. Let me open the link. I just have to open my browser. Thank you very much, Glasgow Kiss. Thank you very much for that kind super chat. So this news article has a little bit more than what we saw before, so we can have a look at that. But this whole idea of having the private companies, I'm sure most of the private companies are US. Yes, they are actually. My circle, the CEO is Robert Sohn's grandson of Winston Churchill. Dr. Johan, welcome. Thank you so much for that super chat. Cheers. Thank you so much. Do you have a question? You had written me some comments on Patreon. But if you'd like to ask me a question now, please do. So this is an update on Dominic Cummings. So at the beginning of the stream, I had talked about Dominic Cummings having broken the lockdown rules. So in case any of you hadn't seen it, so it says here, Dominic Cummings visited parents' home while he had symptoms. Dominic Cummings travelled hundreds of miles from London to County Durham during the lockdown when he had coronavirus symptoms. And I was saying at the beginning how he always looks like he should be selling the big issue or something. No offense to any homeless people or anyone selling the big issue, but he does look a bit rough at the best of times. A source close to the PM's chief aide told BBC political editor Laura Grusenberg, our friend, that he and his wife, Dominic Cummings has a wife, went to the parents' home to self-isolate. The source insisted Mr. Cummings did not break official guidance because he and his wife stayed in a separate building. Yes, but they travelled across the country. Hey mate, just steering home after late shift. All well at yours? Yes, very well. Thank you very much. Stay safe. If you're listening to the stream, welcome. I hope you're well. Hope you're not too tired after that long day. The doctor is he works in hospital in Germany in ICU unit, so he's a very important essential worker. The source include the story was first reported by the Mirror and the Guardian newspapers. The Labour said Number 10 needed to provide a very swift explanation for Mr. Cummings' action. Well, he should resign, or he should be fired. If accurate, the Prime Minister's chief advisor appears to have breached the lockdown rules. The government's guidance was very clear: stay at home and no non-essential travel. So this was non-essential travel, and he broke it. Like if anyone else broke the rules, they would receive a fine, or in some cases maybe even prison time, depending on how many times they broke the rules. The British people do not expect there to be one rule for them and another rule for Dominic Cummings. Well, then I'm sorry, the British people are not following the current rules or the current reality. Of course, there's one rule for the Tories and another rule for the public. When did people think that it was something different? The Scottish National Party, Westminster leader Ian Blackford said Mr. Cummings should resign or be dismissed by Boris Johnson. Me and Ian are on the same wavelength. And this was a key test of leadership for the PM. Well, we know the response. He will not be fired. Spoilers, he will not be fired. Sadly, I don't think he'll resign or be nothing. He'll be. Oh, he's a great guy. He does great work. This will be Boris when he's asked. Yeah, he's a great guy. He won't answer the question. He'll be dodging the question. Yeah, he's a great guy. He does great work for the country. He's an essential service. I couldn't be such a great prime minister without him. Blah blah blah. And next question. And Ed Davey, acting leader of the Liberal Democrats, added, if Dominic Cummings had broken the guidelines, then he would have to resign. It's as simple as that. Number 10 declined to comment on Friday night. The Mirror and The Guardian reported Mr. Commons, the former Vote Leave chief, who was the architect of the PM's Brexit strategy, had been approached by the police. Durham Constabulary said on Tuesday, March 31st, our officers were made aware of reports that an individual had travelled from London to Durham and was present at the address in the city. Officers made contact with the owner of that address to confirm that the individual in question was present and was self-isolating in part of the house. Yeah, he was self-isolating. In line with the national policing guidelines, officers explained to the family that the guidelines surrounding self-isolation and reiterated the appropriate advice around essential travel. So basically nothing. It's like, now, Dominic, don't be a bad boy. Please self-isolate in your, 12-bedroom mansion, and please don't do it again. Of course, as you're Boris Johnson's right-hand man, we're not going to, give you any more trouble. Stay-at-home government advice on the 31st of March was for the public to stay at home and only leave their address for clearly defined reasons, including to exercise essential shopping or for medical needs. At the time, and as remains the case, those with symptoms of coronavirus were told to self-isolate at home and not leave even for essential supplies if possible for 7 days. The source close to Mr. Commons said he had not been spoken to by police and that he had made the trip because his parents could help care for his young child. Well, he has a child. And while he and his wife were both ill with symptoms, why would you go with the child? Surely you'd ask someone else to take the child. Because if you can't travel, then why would you? And this is just bullshit. They wanted to go and visit their family for the weekend, so that's what they did. Complete and utter bullshit. It's like, oh yeah, we needed to take the child, and stuff. The PM said in a speech on the 18th of March that children should not be left with older grandparents or older relatives who may be particularly vulnerable or fall into some of the vulnerable groups. The former Conservative MP David Lidington, who was the de facto deputy PM under Theresa May, told BBC Newsnight, there's clearly serious questions that Number 10 are going to have to address, not least because of readiness of members of the public to follow government guidance more generally is going to be affected by this sort of story. Well, not really, because they'll just... Why did they let him reproduce? I really don't know. Sure, love is blind. The government are going to respond seriously to questions, or they're going to really consider it. Of course they're not. Surely David Lidington understands, or maybe he's just saying it to sound edgy or sound intelligent, but of course nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to happen. It'd be swept under the rug. It'd be forgotten about, or they'll create some sort of distraction. Mr. Johnson's positive test for coronavirus was announced on the 27th of March, and Downing Street said at the time that Mr. Commons did not have symptoms, which was either a lie or they didn't know. Surely he would have access to a test. Then on the 9th of April, the PM spokesman said that Mr. Commons was self-isolating with symptoms of the virus and was not back in Number 10. Mr. Commons was photographed at Downing Street on the 14th of April. Where is he now? That's my question. Okay, so guys, this will have to be the end of the stream, unfortunately. It has been a pleasure. Thank you very much for all of your super chats, for all of your comments, for your donations, for all of those who have subscribed to Patreon. It's been a pleasure. I'm just going to read some of your comments before we end. Gallup poll 2011 shows 82% of UK population ignorance of EU. Yes. One for the road, Max. Okay, killer. Let me... I just need to get the link open from the browser. Just bear with me a moment. No. Okay.
In the White House, the mighty White House, the liar tweets tonight. In the West Wing, the self-obsessed wing, the liar tweets tonight. Exotic liar. He says, hush you doctors, hush reporters, hush you science nerds. Look, my ratings are through the roof when I just say happy words. Everyone can get a test. It's just the flu. It's a hoax like all the rest. A left-wing coup. We've got lots of PPE. The cupboard's bare. It's Obama's fault, you see. The buck stops there. In the country, the quiet country, no nurses sleep tonight. But in the White House, the full of shite house, the liar tweets tonight.
Fantastic, fantastic. That's amazing. Really well made. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Killer. So thank you everyone for coming on the stream once again. Thanks for all of your comments and your super chats and your donations and all of your suggestions. That was fantastic. So everyone, take it easy. Have a good evening, good night, safe day wherever you are. Remember to stay alert and stay safe. Wash those hands and wear that mask. Okay, take care, guys. See you at the next live stream on Tuesday evening at same bat time, same bat channel. Good night, guys. Take it easy.